Adam Chase sat alone in the observation room of Ketralus Prime Research Station. Outside the thick reinforced window, the ice moon stretched endless and white under the pale light of its distant sun. He was the only human on this frozen rock, 3 light years from the nearest colony. This was how he liked it. The silence, the cold, the absence of people asking questions. Out here, Adam could think. Out here, he could work without the politics of the Galactic Council interfering with his research. He had been studying the geological formations of Ketralus Prime for 8 months. His work focused on understanding how life adapted to extreme cold environments. The research was important, the kind of work that could change how humans understood biology across 1,000 worlds. But today, Adam was tired. He was preparing food in the station's small kitchen when the sound came through. A noise. Not the hum of the station's engines or the whisper of the ventilation system. This was different. This was alive. Adam froze, his hand halfway to his mouth with a food packet. He listened harder. There it was again. A low, repetitive sound. Chittering. Almost like an animal in pain. He moved to the communications console and checked the perimeter sensors. The screen showed nothing unusual. No ships, no movement detected. But the sound continued, coming from somewhere outside the station. The dam had trained for emergency protocols. He had been through safety courses. The smart thing to do was report this through official channels and wait for military response. He did not do the smart thing. Adam put on his environmental suit and went outside. The cold hit him immediately, a wall of freezing air that tried to steal the heat from his body. His breath frosted on the inside of his helmet. The suit's heaters worked overtime, keeping him alive in temperatures that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. He followed the sound across the ice. The chittering grew louder as he walked, more urgent. It was coming from the direction of the crash site, an old wreck from maybe 20 years ago. No one had bothered to recover it. The planet was not worth the resources, and the wreck had been deemed empty long ago. When Adam rounded a jagged outcropping of ice, he stopped dead. There was a ship, but not the old wreck. This vessel was recent. Its hull was still smoking. The metal was twisted and blackened, still hot enough that the ice around it had melted into a shallow pool. This crash had happened recently. Maybe within the last few hours. Adam moved closer carefully, his suit's sensors scanning for radiation or toxic gases. The readings showed nothing dangerous. He approached the wreckage and found the source of the sounds. A body lay near the ship's open hatch. It was large, maybe 3 meters long, with a muscular build and sharp, curved claws on its 4 limbs. The skin was a dark gray color, almost black, covered in hard, chitinous plates. And Adam recognized the species immediately from the military briefings every colonist received. Vexrothy, a predator from the outer rim. The kind of creature governments warned about. The kind that military forces hunted and killed on sight. And it was dead. A blast wound went through the creature's chest. Something had shot it down. Adam looked at the ship's damage and saw the truth. There had been a combat. This Vexrothy had been in some kind of conflict, and it had lost. The chittering sound came again, louder now, more desperate. Adam's head snapped toward the sound. It was not coming from the dead adult. It was coming from inside the wrecked ship. Adam's training told him to leave. His safety protocols screamed at him to walk away and call for military assistance. But his feet did not obey his training. He moved toward the open hatch and looked inside. What he saw made him forget everything he had learned about protocol. 3 small creatures huddled together in the dark cabin. They were young, maybe a meter long each, with the same gray chitin as the adult, but softer, more flexible. Their movements were frantic, scared. They made more of the chittering sounds, desperate cries that sounded like pain mixed with fear. Vexrothy cubs. 3 of them. Adam climbed into the wreckage carefully, moving slowly so as not to frighten them further. The cubs backed away from him, their small forms trembling. He could see they were injured. One had a gash along its side. Another was limping on its front left limb. The third seemed to be missing patches of chitin across its back. But what struck Adam most was how they looked at him. Their eyes were not the eyes of mindless predators. They were intelligent. They were frightened. They were looking at him as if asking a question he did not know how to answer. Adam reached out slowly, moving his gloved hand forward at the pace of a sleeping insect. The cubs watched him carefully. One of them took a small step backward, but the others stayed where they were. Adam did not try to touch them. Instead, he left his hand open in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture. The smallest of the three cubs moved forward. It was a tiny thing, barely more than a meter long. Its movements were cautious, but driven by something stronger than fear. It reached out with one small claw and touched Adam's suit, testing the material. The other cubs watched this. After a moment, they too moved forward. Adam realized something in that moment that changed everything. These creatures were orphaned. The dead adult outside had been their parent. They were alone, injured, cold, and hungry. They needed help. His mind raced through the complications of what he was seeing. Military protocol demanded he report this. The government would send soldiers. The cubs would be studied, then destroyed. That was the rule. Unknown species, particularly predators, were too dangerous. They had to be eliminated before they could become a threat. But Adam watched the smallest cub touch his suit again, making soft, questioning sounds. And he knew he could not do it. He could not call for soldiers to come kill 3 wounded, orphaned children. He was not going to report this to anyone. Adam carefully looked around the wreck, searching for anything he could use. He found some kind of container, maybe a food storage unit from the ship. He gathered the 3 cubs as gently as he could and placed them inside the container. They did not resist. They seemed almost relieved to have direction, to have something they could follow. He carried the container out of the wreck and back toward the station, moving as quickly as the ice would allow. The weight was not much, but the significance of what he was doing pressed down on him far heavier than any physical burden. He was going to hide them. He was going to care for them. He was going to do something that could result in his arrest, his execution, or worse. But when he looked down at the container, holding 3 scared, orphaned cubs, he knew he had no choice. This was the moment everything changed. This was the moment Adam Chase stopped being a safe scientist following the rules and became something else entirely. He did not know it yet, but his life was about to transform in ways he could not imagine. The first week was the hardest. Adam had no idea what Vexrothy cubs ate. He tried synthesized protein paste, nutrient-rich compounds from his supplies, even raw meat from the station's emergency rations. The cubs refused most of it or became sick afterward. Adam sat in the sealed laboratory section of the station, watching the 3 creatures grow weaker, and wondered if he had already failed them. On the 5th day, he realized something. The cubs were not eating what he offered because the food was wrong. They needed something specific. Adam began studying everything he could find about Vexrothy biology in the limited archives available at the station. What he discovered was shocking. There were almost no scientific studies on the species. Most of the information was military intelligence focused on combat capabilities and weakness assessment. No one had ever bothered to study what these creatures actually needed to survive. Adam started experimenting. He combined different proteins, adjusted the nutrient ratios, added minerals and enzymes he guessed might be necessary. On the 7th day, he prepared a mixture of ground meat, crushed bone for calcium, and several enzymes he thought might help digestion. He brought it to the smallest cub, the one that had been the first to approach him in the wreck. The cub sniffed the mixture carefully, making low, questioning sounds. Then it ate. slowly at first, then with more confidence. Within minutes, the other two cubs were pushing toward the bowl, hungry enough to overcome their earlier resistance. Adam watched them feed and felt something he had not expected. Relief mixed with something deeper, something that felt like hope. Over the next few weeks, Adam established routines. Every morning at 6, he would prepare food for the 3 cubs. He began calling them by names. The smallest one, the brave one that had touched his suit first, he called Scout. The one with the gash along its side he named Ember because it seemed to burn with energy despite its injury. The third cub, slightly larger than the others, was Nova. Adam named her that because something about the way she moved through the laboratory reminded him of stars exploding across space. The laboratory had become their home. Adam had sealed it off from the rest of the station, creating an isolated space where the cubs could live without anyone discovering them. He had rigged up a heating system using excess power from the station's secondary generators. The space was not comfortable, but it was safe. It was warm. It was alive with the presence of these small creatures that depended entirely on him. Adam's research changed. His geological studies fell to the back of his priorities. Instead, he filled his research logs with observations of the cubs. He documented everything. How Scout grew faster than the others. How Ember displayed remarkable problem-solving skills. How Nova seemed to be the peacekeeper between the two, stepping between them when they played too roughly. And they did play. As the cubs grew healthier and stronger, their personalities emerged. Scout was fearless and curious, investigating every corner of the laboratory, testing every object. Ember was more cautious, but possessed an analytical mind. Nova was the observer, watching her siblings and learning from them. They played games with Adam, chasing the light from his hand torch, wrestling with each other, practicing the hunting movements that seemed to be instinctual even in young creatures. But what surprised Adam most was their affection. The cubs learned to seek him out when they were tired or scared. Scout would climb onto his lap when Adam sat down, making soft chittering sounds that seemed almost like purring. Ember would nudge his hand with her small head, wanting attention. Nova would rest against his side during the long sleep periods. Her body heat mingling with his. Adam realized what was happening. These creatures were bonding with him the way young animals bonded with their parents. They saw him as their protector, their provider, their family. The thought both warmed and terrified him. He was responsible for them in a way that went beyond keeping them alive. He was their entire world. The first crisis came in the 8th week. Adam received notification that the supply ship would arrive in 3 days for its quarterly delivery. The message came through the communication system, standard protocol. Supply ships always came on schedule. Adam had known this was coming, but seeing the confirmation made his chest tight with anxiety. He had 2 days to prepare. He spent the first day reinforcing the laboratory seals. He created a false wall that would hide the cubs' living space if someone ventured into the laboratory. He moved the feeding equipment, the temperature controls, anything that might indicate the presence of animals. He even cleaned the laboratory thoroughly, removing any traces of the cubs' presence. But the cubs knew something was wrong. Animals always knew when their humans were afraid. Scout became more clingy than usual. Ember paced back and forth, making agitated chittering sounds. Nova stayed close to Adam, watching his face as if trying to understand his anxiety. On the morning of the supply ship arrival, Adam made the hardest choice of the week. He led the 3 cubs to the hidden section and sealed the false wall, separating them from him. Through the wall, he could hear them calling for him. Scout's cries were particularly loud and frantic. Adam stood on the other side of the wall, his hands pressed against the cool metal, and fought the urge to break it down. The supply crew arrived at midday. There were 4 of them, led by a woman named Catherine, who had been coming to Ketralus Prime for 2 years. She was always professional, always pleasant, always thorough in her inventory checks. Adam had always liked her. Today, he hated the sight of her. Catherine led her team through the station, checking systems, verifying supplies, inspecting the research equipment. When she approached the laboratory, Adam's heart nearly stopped. But Catherine simply glanced inside and moved on. The false wall held. The cubs remained hidden. The supply crew stayed for 6 hours. 6 hours of Adam walking through his station, trying to appear normal, while 3 young creatures called for him from behind a sealed wall. 6 hours of guilt and fear, and the knowledge that he was risking everything for them. When the supply ship finally departed, Adam ran to the laboratory. He broke the seal on the false wall and found all 3 cubs pressed against it from the other side. Scout threw himself at Adam the moment the wall opened, climbing up his body and pressing against his chest. Ember and Nova followed, and for several minutes, Adam simply stood there with 3 frightened creatures clinging to him, all making desperate, relieved sounds. Adam held them and promised himself something. He promised that he would figure this out. He would find a way to protect them. He would not let them be discovered and destroyed. Whatever it took, whatever the cost to himself, he would keep them safe. The cubs calmed as he held them, their fears easing with his presence. Scout nuzzled against his chest, right over his heart. Ember rested her small head on his shoulder. Nova curled against his side. And Adam made a silent vow in that moment. These creatures were his responsibility now. He would see them through whatever came next, no matter how impossible the situation became. It started with a message from the Regional Military Command on day 49. After Adam found the cubs, the message was brief and bureaucratic. Adam's power consumption had exceeded normal parameters for a single researcher. Additionally, his life support system showed unusual energy signatures that did not match typical operation. Military Command was ordering him to submit detailed technical reports explaining the discrepancies. Failure to comply would result in immediate investigation. Adam's hands shook as he read the message. He had been careful about hiding the cubs' existence, but he had not been careful about the power they required. The heating systems for the laboratory consumed significant energy. The environmental controls worked overtime to maintain proper temperature and humidity. The food preparation equipment ran longer than it had before. He had been so focused on keeping the cubs alive that he had forgotten to hide his tracks. He spent the entire day preparing his response. He created false technical reports describing equipment malfunctions and repairs. He fabricated maintenance logs that explained the power fluctuations as routine diagnostic testing. He submitted everything through the communication array and tried to convince himself it would be enough. The system flagged his response as insufficient. Military Command requested a physical inspection. Someone would be arriving in the next shipment cycle. Someone would be coming to Ketralis Prime to see for themselves what was happening at his station. Adam had 4 days. He called the 3 cubs to the main area of the station and began a new kind of preparation. He reinforced the laboratory seals even further, creating a space so hidden that it would be nearly impossible to detect without tearing apart the entire section. He moved the cubs and all evidence of their existence into this space. He scrubbed the station clean, removing every trace of their presence. But he could not remove the power signature. The heating system would still run. The energy consumption would still show on military sensors. Adam spent a full day trying to reroute the power through different circuits, trying to mask the draw by falsifying other system maintenance reports. None of it was good enough. He was running out of ideas when he heard the ship dock. The arrival was not the regular supply vessel. This was a military transport, sleek and built for speed and efficiency. Through the observation window, Adam watched as crew members disembarked. They moved with the discipline of soldiers, not the casual efficiency of supply workers. Leading them was a woman in a military uniform. She was tall, with short dark hair and a face that showed no expression. Her name was Helen Morris, according to the communication that came through the station's receiver. She was a commander, which meant she had authority above station protocol. She had full access to everything. She was coming to see what Adam was hiding. The next hour was the longest of Adam's life. He met Morris at the station entrance, trying to appear calm and professional. She was not particularly warm, but she was not openly hostile either. She was professional in the way that military personnel trained to be professional. "Dr. Chase," she said, extending her hand. "I am here to verify your equipment status and ensure all systems are operating within normal parameters. This is routine." It was not routine. They both knew it was not routine. Morris conducted a methodical inspection of the station. She checked the power grid, the environmental controls, the life support systems. She asked questions, and Adam answered with careful half-truths. Equipment was aging. The heating system had been running at higher capacity because of a faulty thermostat. The environmental controls were working harder because of a sensor malfunction he was planning to repair. Morris listened to everything, made notes, and showed almost no reaction. She was thorough in a way that made Adam's stomach twist with dread. She was not just doing a job. She was looking for something specific. She suspected something, and she was going to find it. When Morris asked to see the laboratory, Adam's heart stopped entirely. But there was no way to refuse. To refuse would be an admission of guilt. He walked her to the sealed section and opened the door, trusting in the false wall and the isolation systems he had created. Morris stepped inside, her eyes scanning every surface. She examined the equipment, checked the power connections, looked at the monitoring stations. Adam stood near the entrance, every muscle in his body tight with tension. The cubs were on the other side of that wall, hidden in their sealed space. If Morris decided to investigate further, if she opened that wall, everything would be over. Morris was moving toward the far corner of the laboratory, closer to where the false wall was hidden. When something happened, Scout made a sound. It was not loud. It was not a distress cry. It was just a small, curious chirping, the kind of sound a young animal made when it wondered about something. But it was audible. It came through the wall. Morris stopped immediately. Her hand went to the weapon at her side. What was that? Adam's mind raced. He had one chance to make this work. One opportunity to come up with an explanation that was plausible. "The ventilation system," he said quickly. "There is a draft that sometimes causes the pipes to vibrate. The sound resonates through the walls. I have meant to repair it, but the spare parts are limited here on Ketralus Prime." Morris's eyes narrowed. She moved closer to the wall, listening carefully. Adam held his breath, waiting. The cubs were silent now, perhaps sensing danger the way animals always did. Morris waited for several long seconds. Then she turned away from the wall. "Your equipment specifications showed a higher power draw than your reported maintenance work would justify," she said, moving back toward the laboratory entrance. "I want detailed logs of every system repair you have performed in the last 2 months. I want energy consumption records for the same period. I want maintenance schedules for the next 3 months. "Of course," Adam said, trying to sound cooperative rather than frightened. "I can compile all of that for you." Morris walked past him toward the corridor. "I will be reviewing all station systems for the next 2 days. I want everything documented, Dr. Chase. Everything." She left the laboratory, and Adam stood alone with his heart hammering against his ribs. He had survived the first inspection, but Morris was suspicious. She was going to keep digging. She was going to keep investigating until she found what he was hiding. Adam had 2 days to prepare for the next phase of her inspection. 2 days to come up with a solution. 2 days before this, commander from military control either found the cubs and executed them or ordered Adam's arrest for harboring illegal xenomorphs. He went to the laboratory wall and carefully opened the hidden section. All 3 cubs rushed out, making agitated sounds. Scout ran to him immediately, climbing onto his body and pressing against his chest. Ember made low, distressed chittering sounds. Nova stayed low to the ground, her natural instinct sensing danger, even without understanding what that danger meant. Adam held them and felt the weight of his situation crush down on him. He had tried to keep them safe through secrecy and careful planning. But secrecy was no longer an option. Commander Helen Morris was thorough, and she was relentless. She would find them, and when she did, Adam would have to make a choice between following protocol or saving the creatures that had become his entire reason for living. Adam made his decision at 3 a.m. on the second day of Morris's inspection. He could not run. He could not hide the cubs any longer. Morris would find them. The only variable he could control was how they were found and what happened afterward. He could surrender them himself, or he could force Morris to discover them. One option gave him agency. The other left everything to chance. Adam had spent enough of his life leaving things to chance. He prepared the laboratory carefully. He cleaned the space, made sure the cubs were healthy and calm, and gathered all his research notes and observations. Everything he had learned about them, everything that proved they were intelligent creatures, capable of emotion and reasoning. Everything that showed they were not the monsters military propaganda claimed they were. At 6 a.m. Adam sent a message through the station's communication array. It was addressed to Commander Morris directly. Commander Morris, I must speak with you immediately regarding the laboratory section. There is something you need to see. Something that requires your understanding, not just your military authority. Please meet me in the laboratory in 1 hour. The response came within minutes. Morris agreed, though her message was cold and formal. She suspected something, and she was coming to confirm it. Adam used the hour to prepare Scout, Ember, and Nova. He brought them to the main area of the laboratory, away from the hidden section. He had fresh food ready for them, water, comfort items they had come to know. He sat with them and tried to explain in words they could not understand but might feel. I am going to show you to someone, he said quietly, running his hands along their chitin. A person who might help us. A person who might understand. I need you to trust me, the way you have trusted me since I found you. Can you do that? Scout pressed against his chest, making soft sounds. Ember chirped quietly. Nova looked up at him with those intelligent eyes that had seen too much hardship already. They trusted him completely. It was perhaps the most terrifying thing Adam had experienced. Not the fear of being caught, but the knowledge that his choice would determine their future entirely. Commander, Morris arrived exactly at the scheduled time. She entered the laboratory with the same formal bearing she had shown during her previous inspection. She was expecting deception. She was expecting Adam to show her some mechanical problem or some explanation for the power drain. She was not expecting what she actually saw. Adam stood aside and let her see them. Scout was the first to move toward Morris. The small cub had become bolder over the weeks, and the presence of a new human seemed to trigger its curiosity. It approached the commander slowly, making questioning sounds. Ember followed, more cautiously. Nova stayed close to Adam, but watched the interaction carefully. Morris's hand moved to her weapon, a reflexive action born from military training. But then she stopped. She watched the cubs move toward her with no sign of aggression, no predatory stalking behavior. She saw them as Adam saw them. Young, intelligent, afraid. Scout reached Morris and did what it had done with Adam weeks ago. It reached out with one small claw and touched her uniform, testing the material, learning about this new creature in its world. "These are Vexrathi cubs," Morris said slowly, her voice showing the first hint of emotion Adam had heard from her. It was shock, mixed with something else. Something that sounded like understanding. "Yes," Adam confirmed. "I found them in a crash wreck 8 weeks ago. Their mother was dead. They were alone, dying." Morris knelt down slowly, never taking her eyes off the cubs. Scout immediately moved closer to her, and the other two followed. Within moments, all 3 cubs were clustered around the commander, making soft, inquisitive sounds. Ember sniffed at her boots. Nova pressed against her leg. Scout climbed onto her lap without hesitation. Morris sat back on her heels with the smallest cub pressed against her chest. For a long moment, she said nothing. She simply allowed Scout to nuzzle against her, making those soft chirping sounds that almost sounded like contentment. Adam stepped forward and began to speak. He told her everything. He explained what he had learned about the cubs' biology, their intelligence, their capacity for learning and emotional bonding. He showed her his research notes documenting their development, their personalities, their growth. He explained how they responded to kindness, to patience, to the kind of care that any young creature needed. "They are not monsters," Adam said quietly. "They are not the things the military tells us about. They are infants. They are intelligent. They are capable of peace and connection and compassion. And the government wants to kill them because they are afraid of what they represent." Morris continued to hold Scout, and the cub continued to rest against her chest, perfectly calm and trusting. Ember had climbed onto her shoulder, and Nova had fallen asleep against her leg. For someone meeting these creatures for the first time, they were showing remarkable affection and trust. "I know what I am supposed to do," Morris said finally. "I know the protocol. Unknown xenomorphic species, particularly from the Vexrathi line, are to be contained and terminated. I have my orders. I have my authority to execute those orders." Adam felt his stomach drop. He had miscalculated. He had believed that showing Morris the cub's true nature would make a difference. But perhaps it would not. Perhaps military discipline and protocol were stronger than compassion. Morris turned to look at him directly. "But I am also a person who has just watched a predator species sit quietly and peacefully in my lap. A person who has seen intelligence and trust in the eyes of creatures I was taught to fear. And I'm going to tell you something, Dr. Chase. What I am about to do could end my military career. It could result in my arrest. It could cause significant problems for both of us." She looked down at Scout, who was still pressed against her chest, making those soft, peaceful sounds. "I am going to file a report saying that your power fluctuations were due to routine maintenance and equipment malfunctions. I am going to declare this station clear of any unauthorized xenomorphic life. And I am going to leave Ketralis Prime without mentioning any of this to anyone." Adam could not speak. He could only stare at her. "But listen to me carefully," Morris continued. "This is temporary protection only. Military command will send another inspection eventually. They will send soldiers or hunters, and they will not be as easy to convince as I am. You cannot keep them here. You cannot keep them hidden indefinitely." She stood up slowly, cradling Scout against her body. Ember and Nova clung to her, unwilling to let her go. For a moment, she was a soldier holding 3 dangerous alien creatures. Then she was simply someone who had discovered innocence in an unexpected place. "I know people," Morris said. "People who work in networks to try to facilitate peace between species. People who work against the military establishment to protect life that the government wants destroyed. I can make introductions. I can help you find a way to get these cubs somewhere safe. Somewhere they can grow up without fear of execution." Adam felt something break open inside his chest. Not from fear anymore, but from hope. "You would do that? After everything you are supposed to believe about them?" Morris looked down at Scout, who was looking back at her with those intelligent eyes. "Sometimes," Morris said quietly, "the most important thing a person can do is choose what is right over what they are told to do. These cubs are innocent. That matters more than protocol." She handed Scout back to Adam carefully. The cub immediately clung to him, chirping with relief to be back with its human. Ember and Nova moved to him as well, all three of them seeking comfort and security in his arms. Morris held out her hand, and Adam took it. They made an agreement in that moment. A promise. A conspiracy of kindness against an empire of fear. Morris would protect them for now. And together, they would find a way to save these innocent creatures from a fate they did not deserve. Commander Morris left Ketralis Prime 3 hours after their agreement was made. Her military transport carried her back to the main station orbiting the planet, back to the world of bureaucracy and military hierarchy and the lies that kept the galaxy divided by fear. But before she left, she gave Adam something more valuable than her false report. She gave him a data chip with encrypted contact information for 3 people. Scientists, activists, individuals who worked in the shadows to protect species that governments wanted destroyed. She told him that these people represented a network that stretched across multiple star systems, and that they had both the resources and the inclination to help save Vixrathi cubs from military execution. "Contact them when you are ready," Morris had said. "They will help you." They believe that communication and understanding are more important than fear and domination. After she left, Adam stood in the observation room watching the military transport disappear into the stars. He knew what Morris had done for them. She had risked her career, her freedom, perhaps her life, to give them a chance. The false report she had filed would probably not hold up to serious investigation, but it would buy them time. A few weeks at least. Perhaps a few months if they were fortunate. The cubs did not understand what had happened. Scout, Ember, and Nova simply knew that Adam was still alive, still present, still theirs. They had recovered from the stress of Morris's inspection quickly, the way young creatures always did. By that evening, they were playing their games again, chasing lights and wrestling with each other while Adam watched them with a mixture of joy and anxiety. That night, as the cubs slept pressed against him in a heap of warm chitin and soft breathing, Adam held them and tried to plan what came next. He pulled up Morris's encrypted data and reviewed the contact information. The first contact was Dr. Sarah Rivera, a xenobiologist who worked in a remote sector helping preserve endangered alien species. The second was Professor James Chun, a philosopher and writer who advocated for rights of non-human intelligence throughout the galaxy. The third was someone known only as Keeper, and the encrypted file contained no information other than that. Adam spent the next week preparing messages to all 3 contacts. He documented everything. He included his research notes on the cubs' biology and behavior. He included video files showing Scout's problem-solving abilities, Ember's social interactions, Nova's empathetic responses. He included his own testimony about how these creatures had responded to kindness with trust and affection. The messages were detailed and professional and desperately honest. Adam did not beg. He did not cry for help. He simply presented the facts and asked for assistance in relocating 3 orphaned alien creatures to somewhere safe. The first response came from Dr. Rivera. It was brief, but clear. "Your research is legitimate. The cubs are intelligent. I can help. Stand by for further contact." Professor Chun responded within hours. His message was longer, more philosophical. He wrote about the nature of intelligence and consciousness, about how humanity had so often condemned other species based on fear rather than understanding. He wrote about the moral imperative to protect innocent life when the power to destroy it existed. He wrote that he would help, and that Adam's action in caring for these creatures despite the risk was exactly the kind of humanity the galaxy needed more of. Keeper's response was different. It contained only coordinates and a message. When you are ready to move them, we will be waiting. Over the next 2 weeks, Adam prepared the cubs for their journey. He knew it would come eventually. He could not keep them on Ketralus Prime indefinitely. The station was not truly a sanctuary. It was a temporary refuge that would not remain hidden forever. Eventually, another inspection would come. Eventually, someone less sympathetic than Morris would arrive and discover what he was hiding. But before they had to leave, Adam wanted to give the cubs something. Memories. Experiences beyond the walls of the laboratory and the station. He brought them outside, protected in environmental suits that had been modified to fit their forms. For the first time, they felt the direct sun of Ketralus Prime on their skin. They saw the ice fields extending across the horizon. They experienced the reality of a world beyond containment. Scout explored with characteristic fearlessness, running across the ice, testing its strength, discovering the way sound echoed across the frozen surface. Ember approached exploration with methodical precision, understanding the environment through careful observation and testing. Nova moved between her siblings, keeping them connected, ensuring none of them strayed too far into danger. Adam watched them and understood something important. These were not tame animals that had been domesticated by his care. They were wild creatures, intelligent and capable of independence. They had bonded with him, but they were not defined by that bond. They were their own beings, complete and whole even in their youth, and they deserved a chance to grow into what they would become. The message came on. Day 38. A simple encrypted transmission from Dr. Rivera. A transport will arrive at coordinates below in 6 days. Bring them. Bring everything you have documented. We will take it from there. The coordinates were to a small moon in an adjacent system, far from any major military presence, far from the bureaucratic structure that classified young Bexrathi as threats that needed to be eliminated. Adam spent the next 6 days with the cubs doing the things they had always done, playing, feeding them, watching them sleep, teaching them as much as they could learn. Scout had become fascinated by the station's communication systems and had learned to make patterns with the indicator lights. Ember had figured out how to manipulate simple mechanical systems and seemed to understand cause and effect on a deep level. Nova had become a comfort to Adam himself, seeming to sense his moods and emotions, pressing against him when he felt afraid or uncertain. On the final night before the transport arrived, Adam brought all 3 cubs to the main observation room. They sat together watching the stars, the same stars that Scout, Ember, and Nova had seen from their crashed ship before their mother was killed. The same stars that had witnessed their fear and their suffering. "You have given me something," Adam said to them, not knowing if they could understand his words, but hoping they might understand his meaning. "You have shown me that courage is not about being strong enough to destroy. It is about being brave enough to protect. You have taught me that intelligence is not measured by violence or power. It is measured by the ability to connect, to trust, to love creatures that are different from yourself." Scout climbed onto his lap and nuzzled against his chest, right over his heart, the way the cub had learned to do from the very beginning. Ember rested her head on his shoulder. Nova curled against his side, the same way they had rested during those early days when they were learning to survive. "I cannot keep you," Adam continued quietly. "It would be wrong to keep you. You belong to the wider galaxy, not to this station or to me. But I will never forget you. I will never forget what you taught me about what it means to be human." They slept like that through the night. All 3 cubs pressed against Adam, all of them finding comfort in the simple fact of being together. The transport arrived the next morning. It was smaller than Adam expected. designed to move through space without drawing attention. Dr. Rivera herself descended from the ship. A woman in her 60s with kind eyes and hands that showed the calluses of someone who worked with her mind and her body both. "They are beautiful," she said when she first saw Scout, Ember, and Nova. "They are family," Adam replied. Getting the cubs onto the transport was harder than Adam expected. Scout did not want to leave him. Neither did Ember or Nova. They clung to him, making desperate sounds. Adam almost changed his mind. For just a moment, he considered telling Dr. Rivera that he could not do this, that he could not let them go. But he thought about what he had told them the night before. Some forms of love meant letting go. Some forms of protection meant stepping back so they could grow into something larger than what any single human could offer them. "They will be safe," Dr. Rivera promised. "We have others like them. Creatures that were meant to be destroyed, now thriving in communities that honor their nature. Your cubs will have that. They will grow up knowing kindness instead of fear." Adam carried each of them onto the transport one last time. Scout clung to him desperately. Ember made sounds that seemed almost like tears. Nova looked back at him repeatedly, as if committing his face to memory. When they were secured in the ship's interior, Adam stepped back and allowed the ramp to close. He stood on the ice field of Ketralus Prime and watched the transport lift off into the sky. He watched it rise through the atmosphere. He watched it disappear into the stars. And he understood finally that what he had done was important. Not because he had broken rules or risked himself, but because he had chosen humanity in its truest form. He had chosen to see intelligence and innocence where others saw only monsters. He had chosen to protect where the system demanded he destroy. The 3 cubs he had found in a crash wreck, orphaned and dying, would now have their chance to live, to grow, to become whatever the universe had intended them to be. And somewhere in the galaxy, in a community of rescued and protected creatures,